Bitcoin is a better place to be than the altcoin market. So I choose to keep most of my crypto portfolio in Bitcoin rather than altcoins because I think altcoins are going to keep bleeding back to Bitcoin. I accept the risk that Bitcoin could go lower, but I'm not overly concerned about Bitcoin, even if it does go lower, as long as that 50-week SMA continues to hold as support whenever it gets tested, whether it gets tested again in Q3 or Q4, whatever. As long as that holds as support, then I'm not really questioning the integrity of the bull market. Whenever that breaks, that's obviously when the question or the integrity more so comes into question.
Bitcoin has remained resilient in the market, with a price of roughly $108,000 to $110,000 as of early July 2025. After recovering from sub-$100,000 levels in June, Bitcoin is currently approaching a large supply zone between $109,000 and $110,000. Technical indicators such as the Relative Strength Index, RSI, are neutral, indicating balanced momentum and the possibility of a breakout if buying pressure grows. Some analysts see the $104,000 to $106,000 region as a critical support area. Staying above this range maintains the outlook positive, while a breakout over $110,000 could lead to objectives as high as $114,500 or $125,000. Trading volumes have also increased, indicating greater investor interest and potential volatility. In this regard, Benjamin Cowen has stressed his support for Bitcoin over altcoins, pointing out that altcoins tend to lose value in comparison to Bitcoin during periods of market instability. He accepts the possibility of short-term price dips, but remains optimistic as long as Bitcoin maintains above its 50-week simple moving average, which he sees as critical support for the current bull market. Cowen's strategy is based on his opinion that Bitcoin's market structure is solid, and he continues to prioritize it in his portfolio, willing to tolerate some negative risk in exchange for the possibility of long-term rewards. Many market players agree that Bitcoin is a safer option than the more volatile altcoin market. Stay tuned as we bring you more clips from Benjamin Cowen. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, and enable notifications for additional in-depth content. Thanks for joining us again. Enjoy the video.
Bitcoin actually had a nice move back up last week to the tune of about 7%. Not quite at all-time highs just yet, but also not that far away either. You can see Bitcoin right now is coming in right around $108,000, $109,000. So not too far away from the prior all-time highs. The bull market support band, which again consists of the 20-week SMA and the 21-week EMA, ranges from around 95.6K up to about 98.4K. So Bitcoin has continued to mostly stay near the highs basically since early May. The price action hasn't really done a whole lot. We've gone up a little, we've gone down a little, but the bull market support band has actually gone higher. What's really interesting, though, is that this cycle, the 50-week SMA has actually been a much better sort of harbinger of the bull market over the bull market support band. You can see there have been a few instances where Bitcoin went below the bull market support band, namely in Q3 of 2023 and Q3 of 2024. And then it did so again, but in Q1 and early Q2 of 2025. And of course, the question is, will Bitcoin repeat this pattern where it gets a pullback below the bull market support band in the third quarter of the year, in a scenario where if Bitcoin were to drop to, say, the 50-week SMA in Q3, like it did the last two Q3s, there's still a good chance that it would then bounce off of that level and come right back up. Whereas if it did that, it would probably leave altcoins quite a bit lower. And there's always the chance that Bitcoin doesn't do that and instead goes up in the third quarter of the year, right? There's always a chance that it does that. In fact, if you look at monthly returns for Bitcoin, and you just look at, say, 2017, you can see that Bitcoin actually went up in July and August of 2017, and then still got the Q3 pullback, but it was to a much higher level, right? It was a pullback to a price that was higher than where July started. So it's certainly not out of the question that you see something like that occur. But I just wanted to provide that update and if you guys remember back in Q1, we said that as long as Bitcoin does not go below the 2024 high, then the next rally, the Death Cross rally, could lead to a higher high, a new all-time high. What's really interesting is that all-time high so far, that high was hit on the day, I believe, of the Golden Cross, right? So the low was the day of the Death Cross, and then the next high was the day of the Golden Cross. Once again, showing you that the name of the metric that you're looking at is kind of suggests the opposite was actually going to occur. I would argue at this point that the integrity of the bull market remains intact so long as the 50-week SMA holds as support. In fact, you can see that a lot of the prior cycles, as long as the 50-week held as support, then the cycle continued. But whenever the 50-week SMA broke, the cycle was over. And that has not happened yet this cycle. It's kind of a similar idea. It's a similar observation, not quite the same thing, but as the 200-week SMA observation, right? The observation that basically Bitcoin's prior peaks have coincided roughly when the 200-week SMA of Bitcoin crosses a prior all-time high. Exhibit A, and then Exhibit B, and then Exhibit C. But you should know that in the last cycle, it actually occurred maybe a couple months after the peak, okay? But the two cycles before that, it was almost perfectly timed in terms of when the 200-week SMA crossed prior all-time high, that was when the top was in. Last cycle, it would have missed it by a couple of months. It might miss it again this cycle, but there's some different observations you can make about the cycle just based on some of these really simple things, like the 200-week SMA, and the 50-week moving average, right? The integrity of the bull market's intact as long as we have weekly closes above that, and so on and so forth, right? And the 50-week SMA right now is around 86K, right? So, I mean, if there is a pullback later on in Q3, then hopefully that level would hold. And if it does, then there's a good chance that the next higher low would then lead to another higher high, just like the one we just got did. And even right now, I mean, there's nothing necessarily saying that it can't go to a new all-time high or, a new cycle high in July. Normally, the Q3 pullbacks that we see in Bitcoin have occurred around August, right? I mean, this drop here below the bull marks we're up in 2023 occurred in August. The one last year also really occurred in late July, early August, although there was a sort of another one that occurred in July. And if you actually look at 2023, Bitcoin had this big move up, and then it kind of consolidated there for a while and kept like wicking higher to new all-time highs. And the weakness that came in didn't really show itself until August, in fact. Bitcoin is a better place to be than the altcoin market, so I choose to keep most of my crypto portfolio in Bitcoin rather than altcoins because I think altcoins are going to keep bleeding back to Bitcoin. I accept the risk that Bitcoin could go lower, but I'm not overly concerned about Bitcoin, even if it does go lower, as long as that 50-week SMA continues to hold as support whenever it gets tested, whether it gets tested again in Q3 or Q4, whatever. As long as that holds as support, then, I'm not really questioning the integrity of the bull market. Whenever that breaks, that's obviously when, the question or the integrity more so comes into question. Should be a pretty volatile week, would be my guess, because the market's going to be sort of chasing one narrative depending on where this stuff comes in. Hopefully it comes in great. And if it does, then Bitcoin will hopefully use that opportunity to move higher. Remember, the markets don't need a reason to go up. They need a reason to go down. And if the unemployment rate comes in low and inflation comes in low, then usually that's a reason for Bitcoin to go higher. The only thing at that point that could kind of stop it, other than geopolitical events, would be something like if the long end of the yield curve starts to say, all right, well, I got it. The long end might have to go higher if they start pricing in rate cuts if the economy starts to accelerate again.
Last week, Bitcoin gained by around 7%, trading near $108,000 and remaining close to all-time highs. The bull market support zone, which consists of the 20-week simple moving average and 21-week exponential moving average, is now between $95,600 and $98,400. Benjamin Cowen explained that this cycle, the 50-week simple moving average, has been a better predictor of the bull market than the support band itself. He pointed out that Bitcoin has gone below this support band in the third quarter of the last 2 years, and if this happens again, the 50-week simple moving average may serve as strong support, potentially leading to a bounce. Historically, large pullbacks have occurred in late July or August, but as long as the 50-week simple moving average holds, he believes Bitcoin will outperform altcoins. Let's watch more clips from Benjamin Cowen.
What really alt season is it's the constant devaluation of Bitcoin dominance while the altcoin market is going up on its USD pair. If you look here at the last 2 alt seasons that we had one in 2017, and then of course we had one over here in late 2020 and early 2021. So this is what you would characterize as alt season. You will notice though that over the last few years, we have not seen this in any way. In fact, just like the 2018-2019 cycle, you can see that Bitcoin dominance has instead gone up. So if we look at this very closely, you can see you have your period where Bitcoin dominance collapses. That's what people call alt season, right? So this is alt season there in 2017. And then you also had an alt season here in 2021. And then you can see you have something different, right? You have this period where Bitcoin dominance goes up. Now that is not alt season, right? This period right here was not alt season, and this period has not been alt season. This is called Bitcoin season, right? And Bitcoin season is very different than altcoin season. Now, there's a couple of things to consider here because it's easy for people to, do the what about in the comment section. What about this? What about that? In alt season, it doesn't mean that Bitcoin can't go up. Just like in Bitcoin season, it doesn't mean that Bitcoin can't go down. All this period right here means is that altcoins are outperforming Bitcoin in alt season, right? Altcoins are outperforming Bitcoin. In Bitcoin season, what that means is that no matter the direction of Bitcoin USD, Bitcoin dominance will go up. So it doesn't matter if Bitcoin USD goes up, it doesn't matter if it goes down, Bitcoin dominance will likely go up. And the idea is that no matter how great you think your altcoin is, right? Well, maybe I'm not talking about your alt, but no matter how great you think your friend's altcoin might be, there is this reality that it's probably going to be an oscillator at best against Bitcoin. Meaning that when you look at lows for the altcoin market, you'll notice that the altcoin market before the alt season of 2017 hit 0.25. And before the alt season of 2020 and 2021 also hit 0.25. In fact, we actually saw that go down to 0.18 in December of 2020. But the point is that before the alt season of 2017 and before the alt season of 2021, alt Bitcoin pairs, meaning the relative valuation of altcoins against Bitcoin, went to 25% of Bitcoin's market cap. That's what 0.25 means. So the collective altcoin market was worth 25% of Bitcoin's market cap. So for the past 4 years, throughout this entire phase, I've been trying to convince people that this is not alt season. Because the altcoin market, while it has slowly gone down, it has not gone down to 25% of Bitcoin's market cap. It doesn't mean it has to get all the way there exactly, especially if you include other stablecoins, although I think there's a really good chance that it will. My only point is that a lot of people could have saved themselves a lot of pain this cycle if they had just looked at this chart and assumed that this time was not different. That does not mean you shouldn't have bought any other cryptocurrencies throughout the last few years. Obviously, there have been trades to make, obviously, and we've talked about some of those. But the point is, had you kept your crypto portfolio primarily Bitcoin heavy, you probably would have outperformed a majority of the altcoin market, especially when you look at the collective last 4 years. Because Bitcoin is basically pushing near new all-time highs, while the altcoin market is nowhere near it. So if you go back and look at this video we did 4 months ago, you can see that back then, total 3 minus USDT divided by Bitcoin was at 0.37. Today, it's at 0.31, right? So it's making the journey, the journey is continuing to the downside. Now, where it gets tricky is exactly right now. And I've talked a lot about this over the last few months, that there's sort of 2 paths that I foresee for the altcoin market against Bitcoin. One path is to just rip the band-aid off, right? Which honestly would probably be the preferable path, even for a lot of viewers, right? Just rip the band-aid off, like get it over with, right? That would be the preferable path, where the altcoin market against Bitcoin just simply goes to the range lows. And we stop playing this game of where it just slowly goes down. In fact, you can see that it started potentially to break down from this trend line here. Also note that in 2019, just a few months before quantitative tightening ended, the altcoin market also went down to the range lows against Bitcoin, and it went to the range lows by September of 2019. You'll notice that with Bitcoin dominance, a lot of the major pivot points in Bitcoin dominance are actually in September, right? So if you look back over here, last cycle, you can see that was September right there. If you go look at, sort of this low, that was a September low. If you look at the high in 2019, it occurred actually in September. This low right here was also in September. So there's a decent chance that Bitcoin dominance could continue up into September and then potentially find at least a local top, right? Now, the only way that's going to happen is if the altcoin market against Bitcoin continues to drop to the range lows. The reason we can't be sure of that outcome is because if you look at 2024, you can see that the altcoin market found a low in June. And then if you look at 2023, you can see that the altcoin market against Bitcoin, right, against Bitcoin, found a low in June, with then another low in late October, early November, right? So it's not lost on me that we're at a similar position now where the altcoin market against Bitcoin has bled a lot over the last, 6 months or so. And I would love nothing more than for the altcoin market to just go to the range lows and rip the band-aid off so we can start talking about something else. But I also am open-minded to the idea of just a continuation of what we saw the last couple of years, where we just kind of hang around and then the altcoin market doesn't roll over again until November.
Alt season is a term used to describe periods when altcoins outperform Bitcoin, leading to a drop in Bitcoin dominance, while altcoin prices rise against the US dollar. Benjamin Cowen explained that clear alt seasons happened in 2017, and again in late 2020 to early 2021, marked by sharp declines in Bitcoin's share of the total crypto market. Over the past few years, however, the opposite has occurred. Bitcoin dominance has increased, similar to what was seen in 2018 and 2019. This phase is often called Bitcoin season, where Bitcoin outpaces altcoins regardless of whether its price is moving up or down. During these times, altcoins tend to lose value compared to Bitcoin, and even strong altcoins usually only fluctuate around their previous lows against Bitcoin. Before both the 2017 and 2021 alt seasons, the total altcoin market dropped to about 25% of Bitcoin's market cap, but in recent years, it hasn't reached that level. He spent the last 4 years emphasizing that this is not an alt season, as the altcoin market has not fallen to the same lows seen before previous rallies. While there have been profitable trades in altcoins, those who kept their portfolios mostly in Bitcoin have generally performed better, especially with Bitcoin nearing new all-time highs, while the altcoin market lags behind. Cowen also noted that the altcoin market's value against Bitcoin has gradually declined, and he sees 2 possible outcomes: either a quick drop to the range lows or a slow bleed that could last until November, similar to previous cycles. As we wrap up, do you agree with Benjamin Cowen's focus on Bitcoin over altcoins right now? Are you holding mostly BTC, or do you like some altcoins too? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Share this video and hit the like button. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe.